adjunct professor of history at Charleston Southern University in the Citadel, and this evening I'm going to tell you about a little-known event in American history, and that was the last hanging in South Carolina. Now, that took place at a building called the Old City Jail, which is today on the corner of Magazine and Franklin Streets in downtown Charleston, and the building served as the city's jail from 1802 until 1939. And during that 137-year period, over 14,000 prisoners died of its unsanitary conditions, which is why the jail was closed. Now, during that period, many black and white prisoners were publicly executed at that jail. And the last public hanging took place at that jail on July the 7th, 1911, some 110 years to the week that this is being filmed. You see, back in 1910, there was a business owner on Upper King Street by the name of Max Lubelski, and he was killed in a murder at his shop. And not too long after that, his widow was assaulted in that same shop, and a nearby group of people saw an African-American man named Daniel Duncan, not too far from all of this, and a mob gave chase to him, and they tried to lynch him on the spot. But fortunately, the Charleston police came by and put a stop to that. But they arrested him and took him to jail, and they had a trial of him. But in those days, you see, they didn't allow African Americans to sit on juries. So the jury deliberated for only 1 hour after the trial before they pronounced Daniel Duncan guilty of both the assault and murder of Max Lubelski and his wife. So on July the 7th, 1911, thousands of Charlestonians gathered outside of the Old City Jail while Daniel Duncan wrote a letter that was to be read to the public and given to the newspapers by Reverend L. Ruffin Nichols, who was the pastor of Charleston's famous Mother Emanuel AME Church. And part of the letter said that he was innocent, but he forgave those who accused him of being guilty, and he knew that he would fare well in the afterlife in heaven and so forth. And so they hanged him, and it took about some 30 plus minutes for him to be fully asphyxiated. It was a pretty gruesome hanging. And the hanging was so gruesome that they decided to ban public executions in South Carolina, legally that is. And the next year in 1912, they built the electric chair over at the state penitentiary in Columbia for the private execution of criminals. Meanwhile, about some 100 years later, on the 100th anniversary of this, a group of people, Charlestonians, gathered by the Old City Jail to commemorate the hanging and to sing songs and pray, and that service was led by the then pastor of Mother Emanuel, the Reverend Clemente Pinckney. Reverend Clemente Pinckney, incidentally, got belated worldwide fame, unfortunately, when he was among those who were massacred at Mother Emanuel by Dylann Roof in 2015. But there's an interesting outcome regarding the hanging of Daniel Duncan, and it's this. You see, about a month after Daniel Duncan was hanged, the city of Charleston was hit by the hurricane of 1911. And when I was a boy, I heard the older people tell stories about the hurricane of 1911. And get this, many in the African American community referred to the hurricane of 1911 as Daniel Duncan's revenge, or Duncan Storm. Make of that what you will. Incidentally, if you want to learn more about this, there's a book on the hanging called Charleston's Trial, Jim Crow Justice by Daniel Crooks. This is Damon Fordham.